especially Republicans, that you can't mess with the democracy or it'll bite back, and it'll bite back hard at the polls. And I think that, people can say, oh, polling, yeah, we should not trust the polls. But in regards to how things are looking right now, they're better than we could have ever hoped for.
Yep.
And so I will say this. We've done everything that we possibly could have done, period. And so there's no regret. There's no looking back and being like, I wish we could have done this better. I wish he had done better. No, he did. He knocked the debates out of the park as good as he possibly could have, period. And we really have made it far. But anyways, long story short, I just think that tomorrow's going to be a good day for our democracy. And let me just remind everybody, if you were to lose tomorrow, that it's near immediate where he loses all power and relevance. And that's not going to change with him. So if there were to be a Biden win, people are going to start listening to him more than Trump, and I don't know if Trump can handle that. So we'll see what happens next. But he's not as powerful as he's trying to act.
No, I mean that is the hope. I mean, at the end of this,
right.
that is the hope. But I'm looking at the numbers, and you're close to 100 million people have already cast their ballots, according to the one report that I've seen. I mean, look, there were only 138 million ballots cast in all of 2016, and there are 100 million early ones. And I got to tell you, the reality is most Trump people I know wouldn't go anywhere near the mail-in ballot or early voting. So there's part of me that's going, this is going to be a massive, massive defeat for Trump.
I think that one of the things you don't want to do is tell your supporters that you're ahead, especially if you're not. The psychology behind it is as weird as it is. The bigger the polls, the wider the margins have been in states, the more it's driven turnout. So let's say Biden's lead builds in Pennsylvania. People have gotten in reverse nervous about them being like, the polls are lying to us.
No, we got to get out there.
Right. And then Trump is lying about, he's 2 points ahead. You're giving your people who have been doing all the rallies and defending themselves with their friends for years now, you're giving them a way out of like, we've got this. I don't need to show up. I don't need to push harder. I don't need to try and talk my friend into voting. Like, this is a revolutionary time, and I think the peaceful revolution at the ballot box tomorrow, begins. And I do not think that Republicans are prepared for it, and I'm fine with that because they're not going to be involved in rebuilding our democracy initially. And so until we've got Republicans in there that we can trust and you can make deals with, and you can, actually get something done, not people who have ill will and are criminals. One of the things that has been, when I talked to Speaker Pelosi on Friday, and one of the things she made clear to me is that there is right now over 30 investigations going on stemming from coronavirus corruption. Now, I would estimate that there will be hundreds of different investigations, if not thousands of investigations that stem from that. That investigation it's going to be extended by 2 years. So that is in itself going to be the biggest scandal ever in the history of this country. It pales in comparison to a lot of other things. Obviously, there's been some terrible things in the past in this country, but this is willingly letting Americans die. They're being proof of it, and as we just released an ad tonight that talks about how 700 people have died directly because of these stupid hate rallies, and 30,000 people have been infected, and that's only leading up through, I think, mid or late September.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, like, that's not what he was doing. A bulk of these, packing them in, trying to make them look good, and then he's leaving the people out in the cold. He's literally leaving them out in the cold, and also left them out in the heat. And people, had to go to the hospital.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Hypothermia.
I'm okay with that.
I'm
Look, I've always been in the mindset you're a big boy or big girl. You should figure out how to way to get yourself there and back. I don't. You can blame him if you want. I don't. That's this is where I go with there's personal responsibility and accountability. And if you put yourself in that situation, that's your fault.
I you know I look at it as if they are brainwashed cult members. They cannot think for themselves, and they cannot make a healthy decision for themselves. So we have to do our best to make sure that they're not going around spreading the virus. Like there's got to be some kind of way that maybe it's a Trump loss that's so overwhelming that they can't even deny it. But if we think about it for real, there's always going to be. It doesn't matter if Biden wins by 30 million votes tomorrow, which is not. But even if it did, there's going to be people in this country who say that it's not true.
Right,
That
and that's
it's false.
and that's
Right.
where I wanted to get your thoughts because there again I know some Trump supporters who don't think it's in the realm of possibility that Donald Trump can lose. And I keep explaining to these people that, look, the numbers are what they are. Like in Pennsylvania, if the Democrats show up to vote, it's impossible for Republicans to win a statewide election because the math, now this is what we used to know what math was, the math just isn't on your side. Democrats have way more registered voters than Republicans do. And if they show up, if they come out and they show up, there's no way Republicans going to win statewide, and I think they're showing up. And we'll see. The only way Trump wins Pennsylvania is if they're able to steal it, and I expect Tuesday night, and you can give me your thoughts on this, that if it's close here, that Trump's going to declare victory, and they're going to send their army of lawyers out here to try and shut down the count, to stop the voting, the counting from happening. And then all along saying that the Democratic governor and the Democrats and the liberals and the libtards, they're stealing from me. And this is going to, I fear, cause chaos in this state.
I've worked on dozens of campaigns in Pennsylvania and all across the state and statewide races as well for the last 15 years. And I can say with a certainty that it's a blue state. So, I mean, it's not. I never understood why Trump was spending so much time there unless he's just being his sociopathic self where he thinks he can win. I thought he should spend more time in Ohio and Florida. Again, same thing with Michigan and Wisconsin, Minnesota. Like those places are not winnable in reality because there's not that whole I hate Hillary. Like that vibe doesn't exist.
Right.
And the whole I hate Hunter Biden, it doesn't work.
Nope. Nobody knows who Hunter Biden is.
Right. It's like oh okay. With Joe Biden, there's not most people don't think that he's like a bad guy. And let's talk about the bar here. If you don't like Joe Biden, if you don't like either of them, then I want you to think about who they're going to hire. And then that should answer all questions for you. And so you have to have people in government at the highest levels of government that actually care about people, that actually have the capacity to have empathy and love for people, that look at pictures like your friend who I think she had cancer, and so we're raising money for her. And it's like, but that's just people giving out of the goodness of their heart because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
And it's just, I think this would be a great return. Think of how good it's going to be to beat him tomorrow. Think of how good it's going to be to beat the virus with real leadership and clear non-propaganda style techniques and the truth to be present, the reality to actually be here, for the numbers to go down, for football stadiums to open back up and have tests at the entrances so you could get tested, go in there, and maybe not even wear a mask. You see what I'm saying? Like, these are things that he could have been doing, but he slowed the testing. He didn't want to develop it. He slowed the scientific research, the money, the funding, and we could have been the world leaders in this. We could have had home tests for COVID.
Yep.
We could have been able to sit there and done a test and been able to be with our family. I haven't seen my family in 10 months. I've been sleeping on couches when I got it in March, okay? And this is not a disease that you mess with. I've run 2 marathons, 9 half marathons, football player for over a decade, baseball player as well, and I got knocks on my butt. I couldn't breathe. I could barely swallow. You're sitting there laying in the shower at 5 a.m. in the middle of the night, sweating and having tremors, and also being terrified of going to the hospital because you're like, well, I might get worse. So you have this whole pain, the whole thing of millions of people being sick with the disease that terrifies them. I do not know how anyone in their right mind can vote for this monster. It baffles me. I'll never understand it. I'm not going to try to understand it anymore. But I will say we can get there. There are some basic things that need to happen, and all of this nonsense can fade away. And I'm telling you, if the results are clear and everybody shows up to vote tomorrow, we will be able to take back our country this week. It's not going to be a long time. Like, we're talking about, if he loses tomorrow, he loses close to all relevancy. And yes, he's going to abuse his power. Yes, he's going to pardon a bunch of people. Yes, he's going to do a bunch of stupid things, waste money, a bunch of corruption. We're going to have to investigate it, look into it. He will leave office. Joe Biden's made it clear if he tries to stay in office and he has lost, he will have him removed from the White House. Like, this is not a game. People are dying every single day, and it's going up, and it's going to get worse. And then there's going to be people at home who get the sniffles or a flu or a cold, and they're going to think they have COVID, and they're going to have to act like it because we don't have the testing.
Yeah.
So, like, there's no logic here. We have to have testing is the root to all of it.
Yep.
Testing, tracing, and you got to know where it came from. Because think about it like this. If you had a few dozen cases in one state, my guess is that Obama would shut down the entire state. They'd know exactly where every single person got it from, and they'd shut it down. They would isolate those people, and it would maybe monitor them even. And that's the seriousness of this disease. It's not something that you should just roll over because these numbers are horrifying.
No, 100,000 in one day.
Yeah, you can't. This is not okay.
No,
and
you're right. But here's the thing: if we just tested less, we would have less cases.
Right, and if we just didn't give people cures to diseases, they would just die of them. And
I mean, see, as you were going through all of, and look, your experience is horrific, and I know you were having a rough time of it.
Right.
And we were worried about
I hit it pretty well.
We were worried about you.
But I hit it pretty well, most because I didn't want people to get scared.
Right, but here's the thing.
That's a joke. That's a joke about Trump.
No, I go back to the times where he said, it'll be gone in a couple of days. You'll be amazed. The sun will take, when it gets hot, it'll disappear. If we just tested less, we wouldn't have as many cases. I mean, it's that kind of thinking that, him aside, it's that kind of thinking that says anyone who says those things should not be in a leadership position because you clearly don't understand the problem.
Right, and on January 27th of this year, I said the threat from the coronavirus is enough reason to remove Trump. He can't handle this. And I can't believe that was 9 months ago. And it's just, you see the incompetence and the stupidity, and it's just going to get worse.
Yeah.
And he has no plan, and he's attacking that. I will say this. Dr. Fauci, that attack on Dr. Fauci may be the end of him in Florida. And people are not responding well to that. Seniors love Dr. Fauci, from my experience and seniors that I know. So it's just wide-ranging. So people are in a state of trauma and shock right now, just like, for example, after 9/11. And the smoke has not cleared from this yet. But the second that it does, people are going to want accountability. Who was in charge? Who blew it? Who's going to prison? Because if you think people aren't going to prison for this, then you're either working for Trump or you're out of your mind. Because I'll tell you this. I told you this before years ago about Russia. I told you this about Ukraine. People are going to prison. This is nothing you've ever seen before.
I sure hope you're right.
Corruption trial since Nuremberg. Like, this is not okay. No one spread the virus more than Donald Trump, and no one killed
you're
more
absolutely
people
right.
with it than him.
I got to take a break right here. Can you stick around through the break?
Of course.
We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, I'm going to ask you about some of the Senate races and some of the races you're watching. Quick break. Right back with Scott.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1955. That was the day that the song 16 Tons first made an appearance on the Billboard Country Music Chart. It would reach the top spot and stay there for 10 weeks. 16 Tons told the story of the hard lives faced by coal miners. The song talks about falling into debt at the company's store, a reality faced by many coal mining families. The song had first been recorded by Merle Travis in the mid-1940s. The song borrowed lyrics from things that Merle had heard from his father, who was a coal miner. Merle Travis sung the songs of working people. He was labeled a red and communist, and during that era, stations would not play his music. 16 Tons was recorded again by Tennessee Ernest Jennings Ford in 1955. Tennessee Ernie's grandfather and uncle had both been in the mines. Tennessee began to perform 16 Tons to enthusiastic crowds. He then recorded it as a B-side to his single, You Don't Have to Be a Baby to Cry, for Capitol Records. But the B-side recording became a hit. The song was so popular, it jumped off the country charts and took the pop music #1 spot for 8 weeks and became a gold record. Since then, 16 Tons has been covered by a variety of artists, from Johnny Cash to Tom Jones and Tom Morello to ZZ Top, and has become a true labor standard. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you got to get out, you got to vote. If you haven't already dropped off your ballot and you're going to get in line, make sure you make a plan, make sure you have some time, bring a chair, some water, and also don't forget your mask. I would argue full hazmat gear. If it were me, that's what I'd be in. Anyway, welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with our good friend Scott Dworkin, co-founder of the Democratic Coalition and host of the fabulous Dworkin Report. Scott, thanks for sticking around.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
So, I'm looking at, I have predicted now, you get out and vote, absolutely, and we should run the score up as much as possible to send him down the road. But I'm hoping by more people coming out to vote that we take the Senate back, because for me, the Senate's the most important thing. Getting him out is one thing, but taking back the Senate so we can actually get some things done, I think is really important. And I'm looking at some of the polling, and it looks possible.
Right. I've been working on 14 of those Senate races. I think it's 14. It's either 13 or 14, so whoever's fact-checking for me, it's on the line. But we're working in states that I never thought that we would be in play. Some examples are in Kansas. Georgia is borderline as well. South Carolina, Kentucky, we've won in before statewide, obviously, recently. So there's a possibility there. I think that people are not ready for any potential upsets, but I can tell you, as you've seen and I've seen before, senators of much higher standing have fallen before to lesser opponents. And I think that we had amazing candidates. I think Mark Kelly is close to unbeatable in Arizona. I think Hickenlooper in Colorado is so well known. I think he's going to beat Gardner. Bullock in Montana, I think he's going to win. I think Ernst is going to lose in Iowa to Greenfield. I think Jamie Harrison has a very, very real chance of beating Lindsey Graham The Republicans there are not so keen on Lindsey Graham anymore. They think he went back on his word and he's a Trump puppet now, which he is. Oh, that's true. I think that there's a lot of decency that needs to be returned to the office, and people need to realize that what you tweet, what you say, what you do matters. And you can't just throw around frivolous nonsense all the time and not expect to be, it to come back to haunt you. Like Lindsey's words of, if we nominate Donald Trump, we're going to be completely destroyed. Yeah, his Republican Party has been completely destroyed. And, I think the rest of the job is the voters' job to do that and make it clear.
Yeah.
And then I think that there will have to be a new progressive bent to the new kind of Rick Wilson-led Republican Party. And that's going to take a few years to rebuild because you're electing QAnon people. There's going to be other people. Everybody says Trump's the symptom, not the cause, like he's part. But I'm telling you, Trump losing is cataclysmic to all their plans. That is the key to everything. And so, I think the thing that's going to happen is I think Biden, funny enough, is going to help lift up some of these Senate candidates. I think that him being on the ballot gets more voters out, not hold them in. And I think he's been an asset to these candidates where they can proudly stand up and say that they support him. There's been no state where they've shied away from supporting Biden. You know what I mean? Like sometimes in Hillary, like they'd be in the South campaigning and they'd act like she wasn't a candidate. Or they'd be like, I'm not supporting any liberals. Like they go on like a Republican like tirade or something. That's not happening now. People are proud of the candidacies, proud of what the nominee's doing and how they're carrying themselves. And then the broad overarching message of like, I care about you. I don't want you to die. And I think the Senate candidates have done well. Also down ballot, we have great legislative candidates, state, Senate, and House candidates. I think we're going to flip a couple of those as well, which is huge. And I do think, I think that Jones in Alabama and Peters in Michigan are going to hold on. I do not think that Michigan is a competitive state for Trump. I think that is a Democratic state. I think it's blue. And I think Gary Peters is going to run away from it there. Like, I think he's going to win handily, and then Biden will be a little bit behind him.
Yeah, I'm hoping the sane people of Michigan look at those protests that they had, or those hate rallies, however you want to put them, and recoil from that kind of element leading their state and Trump cheerleading them on. I'm hoping that states where that stuff happened, Virginia, being right at the top of the list as well, just come out and hammer them for that.
Right, and a Republican woman who lives in the suburbs, or early 70s, sort of like an aunt to me, said basically along the lines of, no matter who you are, but if you live in Michigan and you saw him attack the governor the day that the story came out about the kidnapping and murder of her and Trump trying to incite it more and attacking her on that day, like if you weren't bent away from him, then you're not a human being. And
No.
I don't, how I feel about that doesn't matter. But I will say that it was really resounding. Like these things have stuck with people. I think that there's reality here of who these people really are, and if we can just keep on pushing, we'll be able to get people like Peters reelected and Jones and be able to expand where we are from here. Because if we control the Senate and the House and the White House, then we don't have to worry as much about the Supreme Court.
Right, we can get some stuff done and undo whatever damage they do. But last line of questioning I got for you, because obviously we've gotten in this mindset of it's team sport. What's the one race? What's the one place that you're gonna keep a special lookout for? For me, it's Georgia. I want to see what happens in Georgia. There's a possibility of picking up 2 Senate seats, and right now the one Womack's the polling has him way ahead. And the other one, Ossoff, is right there. But what are you watching?
This will surprise some folks, but I think North Carolina is going to be something where, I'm from North Carolina. I think that's going to be a place where it's won handily. I'm guessing that you're saying where would the upset be? I'm going to go ahead and throw my 10 cents in there for Mississippi with Mike Espy.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I'm thinking it's another Doug Jones sort of situation, driven with Biden turnout as well, and people realizing it's not as red of a state as people thought it would. It's been over the years.
Well, we're going to mark that down, and we're now going to put that on the map of what we're watching.
I recommend it because, again, I do not think that people are ready for the turnout that we actually have.
No, as I said, look, they're saying upwards of 100 million have already voted early, and you're going to get a big turnout, I think, on election day. And as I've been saying, when the vote totals are high, Republicans know they lose.
Absolutely. If we all vote, then we win.
There you go.
So
vote.
We'll see what happens. Vote for Dems and Biden, but I will say that no matter what, I will be at work on Wednesday.
Me too, because we got a lot to clean up on the other side. But Scott, I appreciate the time, man. Always great talking with you.
Thank you. Be well. Everyone be safe. Everybody breathe for a second and then get back to work. Let's win this.
Good stuff. Good stuff, Scott. Appreciate it. Seriously, as he's saying, because Wednesday, if the votes are counted, if Tuesday night we get a winner, Wednesday is the beginning of cleaning up the mess. But also, I mean, the sad reality is Wednesday could be the morning we start demanding that every vote be counted. We start pushing and organizing and taking to the streets. In fact, there's already a planned-ish rally there's already a planned rally for Wednesday across the country of people coming out to the streets and saying, you got to count the votes. There are a number of groups like Choose Democracy and Protect the Results who are out there organizing. And if you want to check out their websites, choosedemocracy.us and protecttheresults.com. Both of them are doing some incredible work around organizing and getting people mobilized. Because look, I mean, we're in really a crazy, crazy time. I mean, 2020 has been just a horrible nightmare of a year. I mean, from, your normal, floods and hurricanes and fires and, all the crazy stuff that you normally get with, disaster and misery. Now you throw on top a global pandemic that they didn't handle right from the start. They botched all through, and then they really screwed over the lull period that they had by doing nothing. Throw into that recession, throw into that all of the chaos that's coming yet. This is one of these moments where my daughter, this is those weird moments. My oldest daughter comes to me and goes, Dad, I really want to buy a phone, because it's purple. I'm going, that's no reason to buy a phone. You've got one. You wanted pink. You got pink. Now you want purple. I want the new phone. I'm going, but here's the thing. You got your own money. You do your money, which you're going to do. But understand, we're going to be heading into a moment where possibly the virus spikes even more than it is now. And then we get to where, one of my friends has said, we could get 3,000 people dying each and every day from this. And look, 100,000 cases in a day, and we're still having super spreader events. I used to think, 3,000 a day sounds like a lot, but I got to tell you, 100,000 in a day, a percentage of those, hospitalized. And then when you start overtaxing the hospital system, which, if it's 100,000 now, you're talking a couple of weeks down the line, who knows? And I said, you might want to hold back a little bit because we don't know what's coming. There's so much uncertainty in this moment. And the fact that I got to tell my teenage daughter, hold your money, hold on to it. You might need it. Don't have that impulse buy is kind of crazy. Because part of being a teenager is impulse buying. It's part of, I want what I want and I have money, I'm going to get it. And it's good for the economy too. But, the fact that I had to kind of, pull her back from the edge and say, we don't know what's going to happen. Being that be a little frugal here, because We don't know what's going to happen on Wednesday. What happens if Donald Trump decides, I'm not leaving? So outside of having to deal with the crazy year of the hurricanes and the floods and the fires and all of that, and throw on top of that the pandemic and the recession and the evictions and all the job losses and all the people who lost their health insurance and all that on top of it, now we got to worry about what is in essence going to be a coup. We're going to undo the elections. We're going to undo the ballot box. We are going to crush the sanctity of the ballot box. And we got to organize for that. The potential for chaos is there. But I got to tell you, I have faith in the American people. I have faith in the good, decent people of this country to say, you know what? This is too far. This is crazy. We are not this country. We get out, we're going to vote, and we're going to vote in overwhelming numbers. I think we're going to see a historic turnout, even in the middle of a global pandemic, which shows the courage of the American people to stand up, speak out, and step forward. And on Tuesday night, I think even without all of the ballots that are outstanding counted, I think Biden still is going to win. But that doesn't mean you get to stay home. At this point, there's no changing people's minds. If there's an undecided voter out there, I've yet to find him. People are in their camps. People are vested in their candidate. It's now just going to come down to people getting out and actually voting. And I would love to see the person who wins get the majority of the votes. And you go, what do you mean by that? Well, the guy who won last time didn't get the majority of the votes. Trump lost by 3 million. I expect that to be at least double this time around. But the person who did win was not voting. We had something like 90 million people who didn't vote. I would love to see Joe Biden get 90 million votes. Because people got out and cast their ballots. That we, to our core, said we're better than this. Because I think we are. I think we're better than the chaos. I think we're better than the name calling. I think we're better than the insanity. And look, we can argue about Trump's policy and did he do all the hateful things he said he was going to do? Yeah, he did. Yeah, he said he was going to go after immigrants, and boy, did he. He said he was going to go after China, and I'll be honest, I was on that bandwagon going, yep, we need to do it. I was all in favor of the tariffs, but I thought he'd have a plan because tariffs aren't the silver bullet. There are no silver bullets. There are no one-shot fixes. There's no, there's no one answer. It's got to be part of a comprehensive plan. And the problem is I think his depth of knowledge and his depth of policy is one tweet deep. If you can't put it in a Twitter post, it doesn't exist. I want someone a little bit more thoughtful. And I'll tell you, I want to get back to a day where we are able to talk about policy and not about cult of personality. Where we talk about how are we going to fix our problems instead of complaining about the other guy and being distracted by the other guy. I can't tell you how many people have told me that Joe Biden's a pedophile, commie, socialist. And you go, he's not a pedophile. He's not a communist. He's not a socialist. Okay, yeah, he hugged the little girl. Yep. He kissed the kid. Yep. That's what people of that generation did. And if you weren't old enough to remember that generation, as I was, it's what they did. It's who they were, and it's who he is. But the reality is, we're not going to have the chaos. We're not going to have people in regulatory positions who are only thinking about how they can destroy regulations, how they can destroy our government, how they can restrain our ability to protect workers and consumers and citizens, and how they can push for a more egalitarian society where where your work actually pays and that you have the same rights as anyone else. That wonderful Ninth Amendment, equal protection under the law. Just one of those things. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, but please make sure you get out and vote. Quick break. Right back.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1928. That was the day that police shot at protesting union workers at Prince's Pier in Melbourne, Australia. 3 union workers were injured, 1 fatally. Each day, the workers on the wharf had to muster or gather and hope to be picked for a job by one of the shipping companies. The practice often led to corruption and inconsistent work for the men. The Waterside Workers' Federation Union sought an end to the hiring method. The union had been formed in 1901 to represent workers on the waterfront in response to the dangerous and often brutal working conditions workers toiled under. The ship companies were determined to undermine the union's influence. They had the support of conservative Prime Minister Stanley Bruce. And on this fateful day, armed police brought in non-union workers to Prince's Pier. 1,000 union workers lined the docks to protest against this scab labor. Skirmishes broke out between the police and union workers. The police fired into the crowd. One of those bullets found the neck of Australian World War I veteran Alan Whitaker. Whitaker, like many men, had returned to Australia after the war, seeking work on the docks. It took 3 excruciating months for Whitaker to die from his wound. The shooting was declared justified. In 2010, a group of local historians and union members organized to look further into the case. An article published in the Sydney Morning Herald under the headline, "The Truth Was the First Casualty of the 1928 War on the Waterfront." It concluded the original investigation had been a whitewash. Whitaker's story, like those of workers who died fighting for dignity at the workplace, is up to us to uncover, pass on, and remember. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
There's a mournful Peggy Lee song that asks the existential question, is that all there is? Some progressives are asking that when looking at whether to vote this year, Biden or Trump. Is that all there is? No, just scroll down the ballot in most voting districts and you'll find a choice of solid progressive contenders in congressional, state, and local races for grassroots offices. But wait, scroll a bit lower and you're likely to discover a process of direct democracy, allowing ordinary people, you and me, to make our own policies and laws, rather than hoping that legislators and lobbyists will do right by us. These are ballot initiatives, policy ideas and procedural changes that are put directly to voters in a state, county, or city. Most are put on the ballot by groups that get enough voters to sign petitions demanding that a particular proposal be listed. It's not an easy process, but it has become a more common legislative tool, as shown by the number and variety of propositions on Tuesday's ballots. Just counting statewide initiatives, voters in 32 states will be making their will known on 120 ideas. They include such solidly progressive actions as Arizona's proposal to raise taxes slightly on the super-rich to cover an overdue raise in pay for school teachers. They also include such blatantly regressive schemes as the attempt in California by Uber, Lyft, and other gig giants to strip health care from their low-wage workers. This is Jim Hightower saying, especially prominent in this year of pandemic disease, mass job losses, and ever-spreading inequality, are citizen initiatives to start restoring worker rights and income. These illustrate the importance of direct ballot lawmaking. When public officials and corporate hierarchies snub people's needs or carelessly harm them, the initiative is a democratic path for asserting the people's will.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said, the early voting, huge numbers. As someone tweeted to us, Texas having one of the biggest early votings in their history. In fact, if I'm reading this right, they've had more people vote in early voting than they had vote in the last election, which I think is, if that's accurate, is pretty incredible. And here to share some thoughts on just, well, where things are, maybe where we're going to go. I've asked our good friend Propane Jane to come share some thoughts. Jane, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me back.
So am I getting this right?
Yeah, look at us go.
Yeah, I mean, now obviously white men haven't voted yet. That will happen tomorrow because I'll tell you, and this is why I'm looking at this huge number of early voting. I'm saying the Democrats are going to win that by a huge number because every Trump supporter I know is like, I'm showing up in the polls. I go to work. I can go do this. I can pick my nose. I'm going to vote.
Well, I mean, I think here's the thing. Here's the reality for Texas. Greg Abbott signed off on 3 weeks of early voting in Texas. We normally only have 2 weeks. And this was sort of their workaround to not offering any, widespread changes to absentee balloting and vote by mail. Texas did not have the opportunity to do what so many people across the country are doing in terms of sending votes by mail. Now, again, with the holdup in the mail, who knows how that's going to shake out. But I think the good news about Texas is that so many of our votes are actually being delivered in person. And so it may be easier to know where we actually stand tomorrow night. But as you said, yes, so far we have banked about 9.7 million votes. And for the totality of 2016, we only had 8.9. And I think that's really significant for a number of reasons. The margin between Hillary and Trump was about 800,000 votes. Seems like a lot, but in a state like Texas, where we have this year almost 17 million registered voters,
right?
And we've been historically a state that has very low turnout, even in presidential elections. But what we've seen steadily over the last decade is that turnout continues to trickle up every single election. So how we turned out in 2012, we did better in 2016, and we did even better in 2018 when Beto was running against Cruz. So the expectation is that we could have probably up to 12 million voters casting votes when it's all said and done tomorrow. And I think that's why you see the Republicans going to such extreme measures to continue to clamp down on the vote and get some of these votes thrown out like they just tried to do in Harris County with the drive-through voting.
I was going to ask you about that because, I'm actually shocked that the from what I know of the judge, he's fairly crazy and off on the on the right wing to begin with. And this would have been teed up perfectly for him to, to be able to throw us. Not even he was willing to go this far, claiming that he didn't have standing.
Yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, nobody knows, how that 127,000 votes shake out. I think it's ludicrous for the Republicans to even assume that they're just sticking it to Democrats. When they do that, they don't know how many of those votes are Republican votes and how many of those votes they're going to need.
Yeah, but this is what I was going to ask you.
The final tally.
Right, but the reason I was going to ask you about this in particular is because isn't Harris County, isn't it like Houston or something?
Yeah, it is. It's a very blue county.
Yeah, I mean, so I think you've answered your question on why they chose to go after this.
Oh, for sure. I mean, they're terrified because they know that when you start tacking on these votes from the largest metropolitan areas in the state of Texas, and again, like I said, the fact that Hillary only lost by 800,000, when you're talking about cities, I mean, Houston, Harris County is a city of 4.7 million people, right? So if there's 2.4 registered voters in the city of Houston, and so if we actually get close to, over, 60% turnout, 70% turnout in the city of Houston, we could actually be, a major factor in turning the whole state of Texas blue. And so they are terrified of that. But again, I think that this is unprecedented for them to be that scared. And they know that we're coming, and they know that we're trying to turn the state blue. And they also know that we have 38 electoral votes. And so if Texas flips, and now, mind you, they're basically tied in Texas. All of the polls that have come out have shown, if anything, it may be 1 to 2 points, but a lot of those polls are showing that it's a tied race. And so I think that they are indicating how big of a shift we've made and how they really don't have control over the levers of power as much when the voters show up and turn out and stop having this idea that, hey, we're going to go red anyway. It's really just a mirage, and it happens because people just don't come out to vote.
No, and look, if Trump loses Texas, I mean, if that miracle were to happen, there's no declaring victory. There's no path forward for the failure, not counting the votes in Pennsylvania. It's game over for him.
Oh yeah, it's totally game over. And that's why, again, I have my eyes on Texas. I also have my eyes on Georgia, because as I've been saying for months now, going back to the primary, again, we get into this idea of it's these Midwestern states that are the swing states and the battlegrounds, and that's where the race is, and also Florida, of course. But again, Texas has so many electoral votes that if he loses that, it really is over. There's no way he can make up the count in the Electoral College.
No, he loses Texas. There's no path for him, and any gerrymandered map whatsoever.
Right.
That's just isn't happening. And I'm glad you brought up Georgia, because I'm looking at Georgia as well, because there's a possibility of picking up 2 Senate seats, and it looks like Womack's way ahead, and Ossoff is somewhere right there. And I think a lot of that has to do with how hated Loeffler is.
Right.
But the possibility of picking up 2 Democratic seats in Georgia, the Trump effect, this could be one of those things that they look back at 100 years and go, wow, one guy destroyed an entire party.
Absolutely. And you know what else? Their voter suppression efforts.
Yep.
Because behind that movement in both Texas and Georgia, you got to go back to 2018, Stacey Abrams and Beto O'Rourke. And it wasn't that, they lost those races and just took their ball and went home. They went right to the path and said, hey, guys, we need to turn out votes. We made progress, and we have to keep going. And look at what they did. Look at what they took from us. Look at how, again, in Texas, look at how the machines were changing votes. In Georgia, look at how they didn't count all the votes. Look at how they were suppressing votes. Look at how they kicked all these thousands of people off of the rolls. And that's the type of thing that angers people. The disenfranchisement, the historic disenfranchisement that has been here in the South for decades. And I think it's sickening, and it's sickening to the point where it invigorates marginalized people to actually show up and vote.
Right.
Because, again, if our votes don't actually matter, then why are they trying so hard to stop us from voting?
And that's the thing. I think this, if Biden is elected and if we get the Senate, voting rights has got to be front and center, because, like it or not, someone who's spent my whole life living in the North, the power shift that's going on is moving south. The electoral votes are moving south. I went back and I looked at 1980, the election from 1980 and 2016.
Yeah.
And the electoral votes, there's a massive swing away from Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan. They've lost, I think at one point Pennsylvania was had like 28 electoral votes.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're down to 20. And you're just losing that kind of power. So ensuring that people can vote in the South, I guess, is pretty important, because Republicans have staked their entire farm on the fact that they're going to be able to continue to hold on to those southern states.
Yeah, and I think that's why the demographic change is so important. And why the shift, there are so many people moving into Texas, moving into Georgia, moving into these southern states because of the economy, because of the weather, because of a number of factors, because of the cost of living. And that's something that, that they tout, but what they don't realize, I think, ultimately as a Republican Party is that these states are growing beyond a margin that you can suppress the votes and gerrymander things to keep yourself in control and have this minority rule.
Yep.
You know, Texas used to be a blue state, right? I mean, if you think back to Ann Richards, that wasn't actually that long ago, before George W. Bush came in and Tom DeLay came in, and they actually rigged the system to keep it red. And it really has taken this long to get in there and try to, you know, make some changes. And so it's not just that we have the presidential election on the ballot. We also have all of these down-ticket races and a chance to take over the state legislature again as Democrats.
Yeah, and undo the damage that they've done at the state level. Yep.
Exactly, and I think that's, again, why you see youth turnout so high. Youth turnout is up 600% in Texas compared to where it was in 2016. And so that's a movement of people who are tired of things being the way that they've been for the last 20 years. And the Republican Party just simply does not have anything to offer people who want to see us move forward on climate change, on health care, on the gender pay gap. I mean, on so many of these issues that we talk about ad nauseum, you're just not going to get any movement on those things from the Republican Party. And I think the younger generations recognize that and are actually coming out in ways, you know, in many ways to overtake, you know, their parents and their grandparents' votes. So I think that's why, you know, again, I'm always going to root for Texas. I'm always going to want people to keep their eyes on Texas, but especially I do think we actually really have a strong chance to win it here. And it may be a sleeper. It may be one that people aren't really thinking about because they, you know, again, have bought into that idea that we're just going to go red anyway.
Right.
But from what I see happening on the ground, even in my county, I'm in a suburb outside of Harris County. I'm in Fort Bend County. But my county is leaps and bounds ahead of where it was. We've already surpassed our 2016 turnout.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, one of the things that is so important to look at in the Texas suburbs is that demographic change is so significant, particularly with Asian voters and Indian voters, who really haven't made that big of an impact in previous elections, but in this election are fired up and ready to go because so much of the racism and the xenophobia in relation to the pandemic and the coronavirus has been directed at Asian Americans. And I think there's also for Indian Americans a chance to get, you know, somebody that represents their demographic in as vice president. And so I think that's not what really gets talked about in the big headlines, but I think that's actually moving votes in some of these suburbs that people aren't paying attention to either.
No, I think you're right. You know, I'm looking at the average Trump supporter,
Yeah.
and you know the thing is they're really invested in this election.
Yeah.
You know, they bought the hat, they got the
Right.
shirts, they got the flags,
Yep.
they've got all the merchandise, they've got all the paraphernalia, and they don't think, regardless of what all the polls are showing, regardless of what we're talking about of you know historic numbers of votes going to be cast, they don't think he can lose. You know, I have people telling me, you know, Pennsylvania's in the bag for Trump. I don't know what you're saying, but I'm looking at the numbers. I'm going, the math doesn't lie. If Democrats show up in this state, there's no path forward for a Republican to win. But yet we see all of this violence. We see in Texas.
Yeah.
You know, over the weekend you had the Biden bus almost run off the road.
Right.
You're seeing stories coming out of Oregon. They're calling out the National Guard. I mean, there's just all of this chaos going on, and you have these people who are so vested in it.
Yeah. But I think that's also a sign that they know that they're losing, too. The fact that they're acting in such extremist, terroristic ways. You know, I mean, I think they feel like they need to show force and they need to actually brandish their guns, and they need to have to me, it looks like Klan rallies. This is what the Klan used to do. They used to get in, they used to get in their trucks and drive around neighborhoods on the, across the tracks on the other side of town to scare black people. That was their whole plan. I mean, if you think about Reconstruction and how the Klan even came to be, burning crosses on people's yards in response to people fighting for rights. This is all they know how to do when they feel like, they're up against the wall and they have no other recourse. And so this is not something you do when you feel like you have a legitimate case to make to people. This is what you do when all you have is fear and all you have is violence.
Yeah. Is there any hope for the because I keep coming back to this thing that at some point we've got to come off the sidewalks throwing things at each other and into the middle of the street to figure out how we're going to get things accomplished. Is there any hope for these folks? I mean, you saw the videos, and you saw the video from New Jersey on the Garden State Parkway where they had that shut down. There's the story in Detroit with the guy with the mask trying to shut down the counting. I mean, there's just all of this craziness going on. Is there any way back from this, or does it just get worse?
Well, I think in the short term, it will likely get worse. And I think that's what so many experts who study these types of things are saying right now, that, hey, America's on the verge of very significant civil unrest that we haven't seen in decades, if not, over a century. And again, this brings me back to the point about Putin and what he saw in a black man becoming president of the United States. What he saw as an opportunity to capitalize on and exploit that anger and that hatred and that fear of these people who feel like the country is slipping away from them because of demographic change, because of them eventually becoming a minority in this country. And the fact that he was successful in installing Trump, in seeding all of this misinformation, and actually interfering in our election, I think that's a testament to that reality. I mean, if you just study sociology and history and how psychological warfare works, that is why it worked on them, because that is a sentiment that is sort of, percolating under the surface. But I think over the long term, losing will have an impact on these people. Over the last couple of decades, we certainly have seen these kind of, small dust-ups, and well, I shouldn't really call them small. I mean, certainly people have died. If you think about the OKC bombing in the 90s, and Ruby Ridge and Waco and all of these incidents of extremist violence, that certainly has been with us. But I think, again, because we've had Trump there at the top inciting it, it has become more widespread, and it is going to take some time for those people to recognize that their ideology is not on top. But they are going to tantrum if they lose. I think they're also going to tantrum if they win.
So you're seeing tantrum, you're seeing spasms everywhere. Because look, I think they've done organizing. They've done a lot of mobilizing to try and intimidate and incite fear. And I look at the thing in Texas as just one of those things to show that they have power, much like the rally that they had in Virginia that they claim was their lobby day, when it was really just a militarized show of force.
Yeah.
I see this in the same vein, that look what we can do.
Yeah. And I think the part that's even more disheartening about it is the way that law enforcement allows it to happen, and actually plays a role in it, plays a part in it. I saw a video of some police officers in Austin that are throwing up the white power sign with the Proud Boys. And these are the reasons why we say the police need to be reformed, and why we have a very, dangerous problem with these police departments being, and I don't even like to call it infiltrated, because I'm of the mindset that they've been there all along. But this relationship, this sort of amalgamation flag that they've made, this Blue Lives Matter flag that they've made, and the joining up of our actual law enforcement officers with these terrorists. And that's something that I think we are going to eventually have to address, and it's going to be, probably something that doesn't get addressed meaningfully until something really bad happens.
Until something else really bad happens. But
exactly.
But what do you say to the person who goes, look, I know Officer Joe. Officer Joe's a good guy. I know his kids. I know his family. In a small town like where I live, the policeman. They're part of the community, and you would never imagine them to be a guy who's going to hold somebody on the ground with their knee in his neck for 9 minutes. They don't have a mean-spirited, racist bone in their body. You're talking to them. How are you pitching to them that there's something wrong with the way the police departments and the way law enforcement is made in this country? Because I keep getting blowback from people going, well, look, the police that I know, they're perfectly fine. They're good in my neighborhood. We don't have those problems here. That's just an isolated, one bad apple kind of argument.
Yeah, I don't think those people can be reasoned with. I mean, I don't think that those people are capable of seeing policing as problematic because they very much, have bought into the mythology of policing that it is all just for the good and that they're there to protect and serve. They haven't actually experienced in their communities the brutality of the police, and that's by design. They're not going to experience that brutality.
Right.
And I think the reason why Black and brown people feel it so strongly is because we have that lived experience of knowing, person after person after person who's experienced this. I honestly don't know any Black man, literally any Black man that has not been profiled by the police at all. And I think that's why it's such a polarizing issue, because it really is a situation where it's a white privilege to not have experienced that.
But is there a way back from that? Is there a way back from people not being afraid of the Black guy on the other side of the street? I mean, societally, that's almost universal. Is there a way back from that?
I don't know, because again, like I was saying, we had Barack Obama there as president, who, was there doing good for the country, and this is the reaction. This is the white lash to him being the president of the United States.
Yeah. Well, as I was saying, as soon as
he wasn't committing any crimes. He wasn't beating up anybody. He wasn't stealing anybody's purse. But they still saw him as an existential threat to their way of life and the entire country. So again, I don't think that that's an ideology that you can just erase from these people's mindsets. I really honestly think that how that is going to change is when that group of people, that segment of people, no longer have the majority status in this society. And I do think it is going to be painful as we get to that point, but we got about 20 years left on the clock. And that's the reality of the situation. As we've seen in election after election over the last couple of years, our Congress is slowly but surely starting to actually look like America. This idea that we can have an 80% white, 80% male Congress and that they're going to somehow make decisions that, are appropriate for this diverse of a society, that's unsustainable. That's not actually going to work.
Right.
And that's why our laws look the way they do. And they really won't change until we get out there and get people in there who represent all of us.
So last question I've got for you, because I'm reading this story over at Reuters, about how, Trump being in the White House and this election is just shredding people.
Yeah.
And, I'm looking at, relationships that I've had with people who, now we're not talking.
Yeah.
And everybody knows somebody who's on one side of the fence or the other. And this election has been so polarizing that, Putin's got to be smiling and laughing.
Yeah.
Mission accomplished. We could lend him the banner and the sock for his pants. Is there a way back? Because, I'm reading stories of sons and their mothers being, saying, I'm never talking to you again. And families being broken up over this. Do you envision, I guess from a psychiatrist point of view, how do you mend that? Is there a way to mend that?
Well, I think on a case by case basis, a lot of these families are falling apart because I see stories all the time where there's an LGBTQ person, and they're up against relatives who are literally voting against their right to marry who they love, their right to not be discriminated against in the workplace. And I think it's those fundamental issues that affect how people live their lives every day. And that is why the tension is so high, because people are saying, you're not even recognizing my basic humanity and allowing me the opportunity to live life as freely as you're able to live it. And I don't think that that's something that you can just sort of the next day go, oh, okay, things are good again. I'm going to somehow forget that this is the choice that you've made.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
But, so at the end of the day, I mean, I do think that, again, I always refer back to the Civil War. Yes, the Civil War split up the entire country, and there were families that were split up over that, and that became a generational conflict. And it's something that we still haven't healed from, I think, as a nation. And so I think on the individual level, it's okay to say I don't necessarily want to sit across from somebody at Thanksgiving that basically hates me but just doesn't want to say it explicitly to my face. I think that that's a form of self-care. So, ultimately I think the way around so much of this is economic prosperity, is actually putting policies in place to where we don't have a Hunger Games where people feel like they need to tear other people down to get themselves on top.
I'm right there with you on that.
I ultimately think that if more people across our society were doing better, if they had access to the health care they need, and it was something that we didn't make it, a privilege, and we made it a right, these wouldn't be arguments that even would need to even be made. And again, that comes with doing the work to actually show up and get people in office who can make policies that lift up 99% of the population. But if we have a government in place that is only focused on making life better for 1%, you're always going to end up with the 99% fighting over crumbs at the bottom.
You are so spot on. Jane, I appreciate the time and the thoughts as always. Really great stuff. Best of luck in Texas tomorrow.
Thank you.
Let's hope it goes blue so it's over tomorrow night.
Absolutely, and best of luck to you in Pennsylvania as well.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Have a good week and be safe.
You as well. Our good friend Propane Jane. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
It was rapidly intensifying when it made landfall.
Hurricane Zeta slams into Louisiana, its fifth storm in a single season. Logging begins in pristine Tongass National Forest.
Thanks, Donald Trump.
China vaults ahead of U.S. on international climate pledge.
Thanks, Donald Trump.
Plus,
we are facing planetary emergencies like climate change with effectively no time left on the clock.
Thanks, Donald Trump.
The case for court reform to protect climate legislation.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Nice trucks. You think I could hop into one of them and drive it away? I'd love to just drive the hell out of here.
Yes, sir. Please, can I get the door for you? Do you need any snacks? Just go.
And take all the fossil fuel trucks with you.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I think this is our last Green News Report before Election Day.
Yes, it is.
So make it a good one.
Okay. First up, Hurricane Zeta slammed into the beleaguered Louisiana coast as a Category 2 on Wednesday night, with wind speeds just 1 mile shy of official Category 3 status. Zeta set a new all-time record for Louisiana as the fifth named storm to make landfall in the state in a single hurricane season, all driven by record warm ocean waters. Also, some survivors of earlier hurricanes Laura and Delta are still without shelter or aid.
So they're still recovering from two previous hurricanes, and now a third one's come ashore.
Yes.
Great.
Zeta is the strongest hurricane to hit New Orleans since Hurricane Katrina. Zeta is generating high winds, storm surge, heavy rain, tornadoes, and widespread power outages across several states as it moves inland. And there is still a month to go in the historic 2020 Atlantic hurricane season.
So it's not a matter of the category, the wind speeds per se. It's a matter of the amount of water that is going to get dumped in Louisiana.
Yes. In other news, Senate Republicans on Monday rammed through the confirmation of new Associate Justice Amy Coney Barrett to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Who?
A week before the presidential election, expanding the Republicans' stolen right-wing majority, which has been increasingly dismissive of federal agency authority to set environmental regulations. In her rushed confirmation hearings, Barrett dodged questions on the established science on climate change. Several climate and environmental lawsuits are on the court's docket this year, including whether state lawsuits holding the fossil fuel industry liable for the cost of climate damages can be moved to federal courts where they're likely to be blocked.
You're too nice to say it, but her comments at that confirmation hearing made clear that Amy Coney Barrett is a climate science denier.
On a recent broadcast, Aaron Belkin of the nonprofit Take Back the Court explained why his group supports expanding and rebalancing the U.S. Supreme Court and the federal judiciary after years of Republican court packing in order to protect future climate legislation.
We are facing planetary emergencies like climate change with effectively no time left on the clock, and this court is highly unlikely to allow the next president to deal with those emergencies. All the legislation, all the executive orders, all the agency regulations, those are going to be at risk in a Biden administration, and the courts will have a Biden administration in handcuffs on day one.
That's true, if there is a Biden administration.
True. Meanwhile, man-made global warming accelerates. Year-to-date, January to September 2020 was the warmest January to September ever in recorded history since record-keeping began in the 1880s. That is according to NASA. The 5 hottest January to Septembers have all occurred in the last 5 years. Up in the Arctic, Arctic sea ice is at a record low for October. After a summer that saw polar temperatures topping 100 degrees Fahrenheit, Arctic scientists are alarmed that sea ice is failing to refreeze off of the coast of Siberia. Mounting scientific evidence suggests that loss of Arctic sea ice plays a major role in extreme weather events by slowing down the jet stream that moves weather systems around the planet. In Alaska, logging began on Thursday in the public's pristine Tongass National Forest after the Trump administration stripped away protections, including the roadless rule that had safeguarded one of the world's largest intact temperate rainforests. It's also a primary absorber of U.S. carbon emissions.
You know, when I said this was the last GNR before Election Day, make it a good one, I guess I should have said, make it a good news one.
Well, finally, there is a bit of good news.
Finally.
In a major shift, China has announced it will stop releasing carbon emissions within 40 years. A surprise increase that vaults China ahead of the U.S. in climate ambitions under the Paris Climate Accord. This week, Japan and South Korea also announced higher targets. Both of those countries are aiming for net zero emissions by 2050. All three are major importers of fossil fuels. The announcements mark a big shift in international climate relations.
All I can say at this point is please go vote. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Oh, counting down, tick, 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 counting down to the moment we start casting the ballots and on Election Day and counting them. And look, you know, the reality is if Texas goes blue, it's over. There's no way forward. It just is what it is. Well, the day after election, as I've been saying, the work really begins on Wednesday. The day after elections, our Supreme Court Justice, Amy Coney Barrett, is going to hear her first case, one of her first cases, and it's going to be one that is going to, I assume, going to take rights away from the LGBTQ community. Yeah, kind of fitting, don't you think? Kind of fitting. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, well, how things are going to play out over the next couple of days. Our resident expert political analyst, former Ohio Congressman Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick. I don't know what kind of expert I am this election, that's for sure.
It's kind of crazy. I mean, you look at the polling, and I'm thinking that this time around the polling is understating how big Biden's going to win by, but I don't want to jinx it. But the fact that a place like Texas is, polling in play, to me is just enormous.
Well, there's a lot of things in play. I called friends in Texas today, to get a feel on that, and then I had somebody come on my Facebook and say, "Take your predictions down. How dare you?" It was a Trump supporter. Didn't like the fact that I had Trump close. So, but there's some weird. I mean, there's weird things. It's strange dynamics. You look at Texas and then Arizona, of course, which I think will go blue in both the Senate and in the presidency. It'll happen.
Yep.
But Pennsylvania that's the jackpot.
Yep.
Pennsylvania, so goes Pennsylvania, so goes the nation.
Possibly. I mean, but as I've been saying, I even if Pennsylvania goes to Trump, if Biden picks up Arizona, he picks up Wisconsin and Michigan, and one of the votes from Maine or Nebraska, that's your 270 right there. Picking up Pennsylvania takes you over the top.
Yeah, I have on mine. I have Pennsylvania going to Trump, and that puts Trump at 273. But if it goes to Biden, then obviously, Biden wins on mine. I did give Arizona to Biden, and also I gave Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois, of course, and Michigan to Biden. I gave all those. But I gave Florida and North Carolina to Trump and Texas because I think it's going to be ever so close in Texas, but probably Trump has an edge. I mean, I don't know. It's, 4 years ago, I predicted 4 or 5 days before I predicted the election. It was, and the Senate races down to the seat. It was easy. This one's not.
No, this one's not because there are so many people voting, and I think Pennsylvania is going to go to Biden actually, because there are so many people voting.
Now, if it does undermine, then Biden wins. I saw enormous sways of difference. Savato, that predicts elections, the professor, he had Biden in the 300 some, and then Newt Gingrich came out and had Trump in the 300 some of the Electoral College.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's going to go into the 300s on either side.
Yeah, I got Biden 296 to 242. That's where my mind's at. But if he loses if he loses Pennsylvania, he's still for me 276. So I don't know what states you gave to Trump that I didn't.
I gave North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and Texas.
Sure, I gave all the southern states.
Okay, let's see.
I took Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, and everything up to the Northeast.
Right. I gave Biden, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois. I gave Nevada to Trump. I did do that.
Okay, see, I didn't. I swung that the other way.
Yeah.
And I also I gave Biden Iowa.
Right. Okay.
But we'll see.
I see. Yeah, I gave that to Trump. That's where those two states. I see.
Okay.
Where we're at. Right.
So I mean, that's kind of where I'm looking at the numbers, and look, this is my hope. This is what I'm hoping for. But as I said, even if just we keep things the way they were, and Biden picks up Arizona, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and one of the single electoral votes from Maine or Nebraska, that's the 270 for me. But this is I guess why you play the game and why we're gonna count the votes. question, though. I mean, because there's a lot of us preparing for what happens if no one wins tomorrow night, and Trump comes out and says, "I won," and they start really going full tilt boogie at trying to stop the vote. How do you see things playing out with our Supreme Court?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be difficult, even with the makeup of the court. And I think courts knows that. People like Roberts, the president, no matter what he announces, if he announces, I've got it, there's a process here. We have states who have been legally allowed to count for 9 days after the election, ballots that are coming in, right?
Right.
They're allowed to count. They've had a court decision to do that. States are different. Some states by 8 p.m. that night. I mean, it's a hodgepodge of things. But there's a process. Unless Trump orders, this would be unprecedented, orders the Justice Department to do something, and then if that happens, it's just, Katie bar the door. It will be chaos beyond recognition. So now you have a process, though, if you have something like it's so close where you've got a Florida where you had Catherine Harris, the Secretary of State, proclaimed an election, then it popped up the line and went, into the Supreme Court. And, of course, Al Gore eventually just said, okay, to the whole election. But I don't...
Which, again, was a huge mistake. Cowardice.
It was a mistake because it should have legally played out, but, he didn't. And so if Trump says, I'm elected, it doesn't matter what he says. There's a process here, and I would be just amazed if the Supreme Court just said, they're going to stop everything right at that point. I would seriously be amazed if they did that.
Yeah,
I think it would cause chaos.
I think you're right, but I fear a 6-3 court because you brought up Roberts' name. Roberts is irrelevant at this point. You might as well count him as one of the liberals. He's completely, there's nothing there. But I got to tell you, I'm this election's weird for me because, for the first time in a while, I'm looking at some polling that says your state of Ohio is in play. What are you seeing on the ground?
Oh yes. Oh well, Trump, I believe, is going to win. I think by 1 point, maybe a 1.5 or 2 at the most, but it is in play. And if you go into rural Ohio, it is Trump kingdom.
Right.
It's just everywhere. When you go into Franklin County, Columbus, you barely find a Trump sign anywhere. In the city of Columbus, areas and suburbs, Cincinnati and Cleveland, of course, in particular, is going to be heavy Biden. So, kind of breaks down that way. Obama was able to, transcend and pick up more votes, than Biden will be able to pick up, frankly, in rural areas. Obama will have done better. So it's like a fight of the rural and the urban. But I think Trump wins Ohio narrowly, which, there's two ways to look at it. One talk show host today, he's a progressive, said he can't actually imagine this stuff is this close. He doesn't know why. And on the other hand, some Trump people are shocked at why this is so close. It's just a polarized, close election.
No, it is, and you're right. The divide is between the urban areas and the rural areas. But I look at a state like Pennsylvania, which is a blue state, whether you like it or not. The voter registration is glaring. 45% of the registered voters are Democrats, 31% are Republican, 21% are others. You can split those between the Greens and the Libertarians and everybody else. But when Democrats come out to vote, they don't lose. Hillary lost the election, in my view, because she was a woman, and she was Hillary Clinton. Because and I've told you this before, the 3 row offices, treasurer, auditor general, and attorney general, all walked away in their elections by 5 points, 6 points in that election year. Hillary and Katie McGinty, who ran for Senate, both two women, they both lost by a point. So it wasn't that the Republicans came out big in Pennsylvania and swung the vote. It's that there were some conservative, moderate Democrats who said, white guy, orange guy. And that's what swung Pennsylvania. So I'm not as concerned about Pennsylvania if we count the votes. if there isn't something that shows up that we don't count all of the early votes and the ones that show up on election day or after, that's the only way I see him winning Pennsylvania.
Right. Well, he also the trade issue with Hillary. Nobody trusted Hillary Clinton on trade bills. Nobody. She liked. She hated the trade bills until they were voted on. Then she liked them, and that's why I have always argued to this day that had Bernie Sanders been on that ticket, and people laugh at this, but Bernie Sanders would have won Pennsylvania.
Absolutely.
I've always argued that he would have won Pennsylvania.
No question about it. And look, I held my nose and voted for because I wasn't happy with the trade. In fact, I liked his argument on trade better than hers. Obviously, hers she wanted to do something along the lines of a trade prosecutor, and we were going to use more 230 cases and do more stuff like that. And I'm like, no, we got to realign things a lot more than that. But right. sadly, Trump failed on the one part that I agreed with him on.
Right, and that's what is a factor in Pennsylvania. Had Donald Trump been successful in the whole trade war the past 4 years, successful at it, Pennsylvania would be in the palm of his hand.
Yep. No, I'm right there with you. Let's move down to the Senate races because for me, the power is in the Senate. Where do you see the races to watch? Do you see any big upsets? What are you looking at?
Well, on this one, I've come out with the end of a 50-50, which if Biden wins, then Harris, of course, breaks the ties.
Right.
I've got Jones losing in Alabama, which gives the Republicans a seat. Then I've got Hickenlooper winning in Colorado, who's Democratic, and I have McSally losing in Arizona.
Sure.
She's a Republican. I have Collins losing. I usually land in the category of it's a close race, it's Collins, it's Maine. Collins squeaks through and wins. This time I have her losing.
Me too.
Maine. And then North Carolina, I have Tillis losing. And then I've got Purdue winning in Georgia, and I've got Lindsey Graham winning, holding on. So I came up with 50-50.
Yeah, see, I came up with 51. I think the two Georgia seats are going to split. I think Womack's going to win. I think Ossoff's going to lose. But then there's my hope of hopes that you pick up another one or two in some places. But I'm looking at Georgia. There's a possibility of picking up 2 Senate seats there if Ossoff does well.
True, that's true. I had Georgia into the R column. Of course, they've got that runoff system down there.
Right.
But that's what I came up with 50-50. In the House, I gave them they're going to lose some seats and gain some seats. So I gave the House overall, basically, I think 5 to 7 seat gain on top of what they have. They'll hold.
So the question then becomes, on the other side of the election, does Biden have enough of a mandate to actually push some things through? Because I expect the Supreme Court to undo the ACA or severely hamper it. Do you see them being able to move an agenda in the first 100 days? Because that's really what they're going to get.
I do, and the reason I do is because of the fact that Biden is smart enough, and Trump didn't understand this. Look, Trump's first thing out of the box, the first thing should have been a transportation infrastructure bill.
Yep.
He was in a honeymoon of sorts. He's going to be, even though people were yelling about him, he was still in a honeymoon. He never grasped that. It just became Donald Trump in the election, and I get the biggest crowds, and they cheated me, blah, blah, blah. Biden, on the other hand, no matter how this ends up, no matter what strength he comes into office or not, Biden, on the other hand, I think knows the honeymoon effect, and I think he can successfully be able to, to do something. And the Senate, being as close as it is, look, there's always going to be a hot dog, all right? There's going to be some Republicans that if it goes 50-50, Rick, they're going to cut a deal. I think.
I hope so.
With Biden,
yeah,
especially because he served there.
Right. I mean, he knows the game. Do they do away with the filibuster for legislation? Do they go to 51 votes to pass something?
Right. I think they do, which to me is fine. I think it's a archaic item anyway.
Yeah, I think at some point you just got to go. It's done with. We move on.
Right.
Because we got a lot of problems to deal with. a lot to fix and a lot to pick up on. Because look, I think the virus is going to continue to grow. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the numbers, and you see Trump with these super spreader events, and I'm sure you saw the Stanford study that came out said, thanks Don, you've added another 30,000 people to the sick list, and probably another 700 dead. But hey, you keep it up.
Well, all those factors you mentioned, and I think people are going to be tired. Sure, there's going to be the loyalists on, either side. I think in general, though, people are seriously going to be tired.
Yeah.
And if the right type of leadership comes in and they say the right type of things and try to, effectively do something, I think they'll get support because, like I said, I believe people are pretty tired.
So last question.
And the pandemic is going to take its
So last question I've got for you, because you said a bit ago you had people on your Facebook page, yelling at you to take something down that was critical of Trump, and we've had these conversations for a while. Do those relationships heal? Do you see that, going back and going, okay, that we had this spasm where, we were so invested in our guy, and not able to talk about anything rationally? Do you see that stopping in the Biden years, or does it just get that much worse?
Well, I don't. That's a hard question to answer. I mean, the citizen in me wants that to happen. I just don't know. I think it's how well Biden will handle things. Knowing Biden, and the way he, was which he got criticized for by some of the Democratic side, the way he was in the Senate.
Yeah.
But I think some of it could heal, and I think if Biden, just puts forth a good foot as much as he can, and he won't be talking about, I'm Joe Biden, I'm the greatest on earth, look at me, look what you're doing. He's not going to do that. And so, people may, not all of them, but some people may heal and try to get on with everything. We've got some serious problems, serious.
No, at the end of the day, I keep coming back to, if the economy does well and people are happy and people are able to make a living and put food on the table and not worried that they're going to get tossed into the streets and lose their health care, I think things will be just fine. We continue on the recession path, it's going to be trouble.
Oh, that's going to be big trouble. But I agree with you. If things can get on a better footing, again, people are very seriously tired. This has been a rough couple of years.
I'm with you. And like I said, for me, the last 4 years, and I was just telling my wife this, I'm going, the last 4 years has been so Trump focused, and it's not ever what I wanted to do with radio. This is not what I wanted to be doing. I didn't want to be focused on that kind of insanity. I wanted to talk about worker issues. I wanted to talk about policy. I wanted to do the wonk stuff. But every day there's this bit of chaos. There's the fire hose that's just blasting you in the face at every turn. That's what dominated our discussions, and I'm actually looking forward to not mentioning his name ever again.
Well, I've been doing this since 2008, and I've said this to a lot of the talk show hosts that I work with. I've never seen anything like it. Used to be I got up, I would have to surf some Bush news, then Obama was president. This one, you just turn on your computer and there's the Trump. I thought after 2 years, a couple years ago, I thought after 2 years, well, this will kind of calm down. It never did. It dominates. It daily dominates like nothing I've ever seen before. And after a while, you get exhausted.
Yep,
I agree with you.
I got to tell you, I don't know what drugs the guy's on, but I'd like to know, because to be honest, there's got to be a team of people who are doing his midnight tweets and the amount of things that he does to keep us completely in chaos is just incredible to me. I mean, I give him credit for being able to terrorize an entire nation.
I like how you put that. I mean, really, look, I was in Congress, and like any member of Congress, you do this, you go home, you go to the county fairs, you got people calling you, blah, blah, on and on and on. That you have times you stop and you rest, and you don't have chaos all the time. This is nothing but chaos. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, if I worked in the White House, no wonder the longevity is 3 months.
Yeah. And no wonder, there were so many people wanting to write books to get him ousted. It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't actually know how he's continued on like this. Like I said, if you've ever been in public office, you do have to have your breaks, and this doesn't happen.
Yeah, but I guess the other side of it is he's the one causing the chaos. He's not the one getting the chaos. Because interestingly enough, any other presidency, half the stuff he'd have done had gotten him impeached numerous times.
Oh, of course. Of course. Or they would be, 40 points down.
Yeah.
It's just chaos.
Anyway, Bob, I appreciate the time. Best of luck in Ohio tomorrow.
Okay.
Always great talking with you. Our good friend, former Ohio Congressman Bob Ney. No, seriously. I mean, I've said it before, and I've said it a million times. I don't know what a lot of people are going to do once Trump goes away. I was, just having this conversation. Trump was not the focus of this program before he became president. The focus of this program was how do we get policies passed? How do we push for higher minimum wages, safer working conditions? How do we push for better opportunities for people to support their families? And like Bob said, right when Trump became president, I said the best thing he can do if he wanted to really unite the country, that massive infrastructure bill he had talked about while running, that they haven't even brought up. I know every week is infrastructure week, but it never comes with any plan or any money. This administration real light on the plans that move the country forward. Pretty heavy on the executive orders to undo and destroy things, but not so much on how we're going to move us forward. I'm looking forward to, really am. How do we get forward? How do we have a 21st century economy with infrastructure that, is the envy of the world once again? How do we create those good paying jobs that people can retire from and have families and be prosperous with? For me, that's the future. And I think Joe Biden's the guy who can do that. Just my thoughts. And we'll see what happens. But please, by all means, no matter what you think, you got to get out and vote. No matter which side of this you're on, you got to vote. It's your civic duty. It's part of being an American. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.